Hi, my name is Michael Foley. I'm a certified financial planner and student loan professional, and wanted to take some time today to talk through some different strategies as it relates to reporting your income on an income-driven repayment plan and some other tax strategies that can go along with that as well. So for those of you on an income-driven repayment plan, you have to disclose an income, and they use that income and your household size to justify what is your student loan payment. And so when you show them your income, they use that income to justify your payment for the next 12 months. And then every 12 months, they come back to you and you have to recertify your income. So when you recertify your income, you have to disclose what your income is, and then that updates what your student loan payment will be for the next 12 months thereafter. But when you go to initially sign up, or when you have one of your recertification dates, you have some options when it comes to reporting your income. A lot of people think that they have to report their income, immediate income. What is their income at that time? But there actually are three ways that you're legally able to report your income, and you don't have to report the least advantageous one for you, okay? So the first way is if we want to report based off of a pay stub. So we can use a pay stub and say this is how much we're making throughout the year, and that will be used to justify your payment. The next is a contract. So if you have an employment contract, you can share with them what is your annual salary, and then they will use that to justify your payment. The third, and probably arguably the most common that we see, is using your most recently completed tax return, as long as it's been within the last 2 years. So they give you that last option, and so it really does open up some opportunity for especially a lot of our clients that may be going through some income transitions and maybe having a lower income last year, but maybe now they're moving into a higher income domain. You may not need to report that higher income just yet, because if we, are reporting our last year's tax return, that's going to report our income from the last calendar year. So oftentimes, if we do it right, we might be able to create a little bit of a lag before we have to report the higher income and thus have a higher student loan payment. So it's really critical when we're looking at how do we want to report that, especially when it comes to public service loan forgiveness or some of the new interest subsidies that we can have on some of these new repayment plans like the SAVE plan, okay? So let's talk through some different, one of the other strategies that we typically see. A lot of our clients will oftentimes use a tax extension. And so oftentimes if we do an extension on our tax return, that can delay when we need to actually report what our income is, right? So let's use an example. So let's say we're in August of, let's fast forward, we're in January of a given year. And in January, you go and you have to report your income. And so they say, okay, well, let's maybe send us one of those three options. And you say, well, let's just use my tax return. But then you say, oh, well, actually, I haven't filed my taxes for this previous year yet because it's only January. I haven't even gotten all the tax documents. And so that's where they come into you and they say, well, no worries. Well, you have the option to report based off of your most recently completed tax return. And since that year prior is still within 2 years, you can use that one. And we'll use that to justify your payments for the next 12 months. So what that allows is now we can actually use that income from 2 years ago to justify your payment moving forward for the next 12 months. So that creates a 2-year lag in your actual reportable income. So now take that to the next step. Let's say your recertification date is in July. Well, oftentimes, when we file in April, that would be the tax return that we'd have to report if we're in July, right? But you do have the option to file an extension on your tax return. So if we file an extension on our tax return, then we haven't submitted the actual formal return yet in July, they can do the same thing and they'll report based off of the most recently completed one at that time. And then after you report, then if you want to file your taxes thereafter, that won't impact your student loan payment until the next time you have to recertify. So often opens up some different strategies to really lengthen how long we can keep that payment lower for people, okay? Now let's talk a little bit about for married couples. So if you're married, that we have to now calculate your payment based off of now your household size with your spouse and any children that you have, But also we have to look at your spouse's income and how is that going to play into the mix here. So when we're looking at your spouse's income, we have a couple different options. So if you file your taxes jointly, regardless of which plan you're in, they're always going to ask, what is your spouse's income? And they're going to use that to justify what your payment is on your student loans as well. So even if you report your pay stub and don't want to show them your spouse's, even if you filed your taxes jointly and you show your pay stub, they're going to ask for your spouse's pay stub as well. So that's not a way to get around it. The only way that we can really isolate your income from your spouse's income is by filing your taxes separately. And when we file our taxes separately, that opens up the window to either use your filed separate tax return to justify your payment, or you can even show your pay stub and they're not going to ask for your spouse's, right? So that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for us to really reduce what your student loan payment commitment is, okay? Now, the other option that we have in certain states that are called community property states. So there's only 9 community property states. They're mostly along the West Coast. And if you fall into one of the community property states, that we have an option now that you can actually decide if you want to bring all of your household income together. And when you file your taxes separately, you are allowed to draw the line down the middle. Because technically in a community property state, all income for that household is equal property. So if we're able to do that, we can draw the line down the middle. And so let's say you're making $200,000 and your spouse is only making $100,000. Well, if you were to just file separately normally, then you'd have to report your income as $200,000. However, if we do it in a community property state, well, your household is making $300,000. And if we draw the line down the middle, then that's going to allow us to report based off of $150,000. So therefore shaving $50,000 off of what you have to report. And that's going to be absolutely commensurate with a lower student loan payment for you. So that's definitely something to make sure that you're working with an accountant on, because oftentimes filing separately comes with its own slew of issues, right? And oftentimes you're missing out on things from a tax standpoint. And so it's really important that us as a student loan planner and your accountant are communicating on this, because the tax person is most oftentimes going to say that filing jointly is going to be better from a tax situation. And the student loan planner is oftentimes going to say that filing separately is going to be better. But we have to see by what degree is it better. So if we're missing out on a couple $1,000s of savings from a tax standpoint by filing separately, but we can save $12,000 on the student loan front, then it makes sense, right? And so we can develop more of a cohesive plan around that. But make sure that you're working with the accountant and looking at those different options, and we're not just blankly filing separately, because there are some instances that we can still file jointly. So especially if both spouses have federal student loans, that does change the calculus a little bit, and oftentimes may open up some opportunities for you guys to still file jointly. So hopefully this is helpful to give you some ideas of how we can actually report our income. So we know that we can report based off our pay stub, our contract, or our most recently completed tax returns. We know that we can play with tax filing extensions, and that can be a great option for us to really extend how long we need to report as a lower income. And we also know that we have the option to file our taxes separately from our spouse and potentially even use community property rules if that falls into your situation and you're in the right state. So thanks so much for taking the time, and hope to see you in another series.